and this is the introduction to IronGeek. For those of you who don't know, he's a security blogger extraordinaire and other things.
I have a lot of spare time.
Yes, and he's here to talk about one of his projects you've been working on for a little over a year.
Yeah, thereabouts. I think Outer Zone 2010 was where it kind of started off. Actually, started off like ShmooCon 2010. Outer Zone 2010 started showing it off. Tensi sponsored me for some research, and I just been piling on stuff after that.
Cool. Well, you guys should enjoy.
Well, hello everybody. The presentation you're about to be subjected to is more fucked than ever. For those who don't know, FUKED, of course, stands for Programmable Hid USB Keyboard and Mouse Dongle. Some people say I have a sophomoric sense of humor. All right, a little bit about me. My name is Aiden Crenshaw. I run IronGeek.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, there's my handle. I have an interest in InfoSec education. I don't know everything. I'm just a geek with time on my hands. It's possible I'll get things wrong. If I do, come up to me after the talk and tell me why I got it wrong. I'd be interested in knowing the truth. I don't know everything. I'm just a geek with time on my hands, like I said before. I'm also an irregular on the ISD podcast. They podcast, well, now 6 times a week. I'm usually on Thursdays. I'm also a co-founder of DerbyCon. And while it's not in this slide, I do an occasional side project for the Tensi Institute, who, for some earlier parts of this project, they were very kind in helping sponsor me getting some equipment to actually put things together. So I greatly appreciate that. All right, a little refresher on the FUKED, for those who don't know. So if you've seen one of my previous talks on the FUKED, you can probably step out for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes and come back in and not really miss anything. If you're going to go out, get yourself a beer, bring me back some mead. All right, a little story about how this whole project started off. ShmooCon 2010, I gave a fireside talk, and I was given this little gift called a Phantom Keystroker. And basically, you plug it in, and it's a gag gift. It like toggles caps lock and types random keys. It doesn't hit enter to submit anything, but it basically is there to annoy the user. I was like, well, what if you could program this with like keystrokes you already know of? People have been using U3 thumb drives for a while and auto-run functionality. You plug it in, it automatically runs something. But so many people turn off auto-run anymore that was kind of going by the wayside. However, no one I know really blocks USB HID devices that are plugged in. HID device meaning human interface device. You plug that in, and generally, even if you're not an admin, it's going to install the drivers automatically, and you can start running. And you can script it to type anything you want. So what if you could find something like this that was programmable? Well, what would you want to do with something like that? Well, it's probably likely to go to type faster than you can and without errors, so that's pretty nifty. Works even when U3 is turned off. Draws less attention than sitting down in front of a terminal. And a person turns their head for a minute, pen tester plugs in a programmable USB keystroke dongle, and Bob's your uncle, instant pwnage. You can also be set to go off on a timer when you know the target's going to be gone. So, maybe set it 8 hours after initial power on, dump your keystrokes. Just use your imagination. What sort of commands might you want to run with one? Well, it could be anything from like add a user, run a certain program, copy files to a thumb drive for later retrieval. A lot of people have been using U3 drives for instantly collecting data, let's say like dumping password hashes, or even actually in a less malicious or pen testing format, people who are first responders, incident responders, and they need to quickly gather information about a system, and they have to straddle that line between leaving a system up that might be compromising more systems on a network and getting the live data. Russell Butterini had his little U3 device that you plug in, and it was this instant response switchblade. Plug it in, and it automatically dump information like running processes, network sessions, and that sort of thing. You could replicate some functionality like this as well. Upload local files, download and install apps, or I know Dave Kennedy and them have done a lot of work on basically using it as a first step on delivering Metasploit payloads to a machine. You can do things like have it automatically go to a website and do something like a cross-site request forgery in hardware. Okay, it's not really a cross-site request forgery in that sense, but essentially you can have it, if you know someone uses Facebook regularly, you can leave one of these devices behind and have it automatically make Facebook posts for you. I had a working version of that at one time, then Facebook changed the way they lay out the mobile site. Little tip, look at the mobile sites. The mobile sites are usually simpler, and it's a little easier to script functionality by going this key, this key, this key, this key. All right, other ideas I had for running with these, embed a hub and storage, and I actually have a model that has a mouse. It's a mouse, and it has a hub embedded in it, a Tensi device, and some USB storage, so it can automatically copy stuff to that. If you're wondering how you know what drive to copy to, there's a simple script, it's somewhere on my website, that will look for a drive based on its volume label and copy to that. That's the most reliable way, because when you plug your drive into a new system, you don't know what drive letter you're necessarily going to get. You can leave one around a parking lot in a thumb drive looking package for unsuspecting people to pick up and use. And of course, Trojan hardware, you use a timer or a sensor and embed it in some kind of device that's USB powered and give it as a gift to somebody. As a very limited test example, Tenacity's logo is this wolf, and so I tried to embed a Tensi inside of a wolf. But let's say SkyDog. Let's say you want to hit SkyDog. SkyDog's logo is obviously a dog. You could try to embed it inside of a dog, give it to him as a gag gift, and see if he'll actually plug it into his home system. I don't know if that would work on SkyDog, but that gives you an idea of the kind of things you can do with it. You've seen those, what do they call it? Nabiscos? You've seen those little bunny rabbits that give you alerts about things that are going on? Think about embedding one in that sort of device. You can have it wake up, mount onboard storage, run a program that covers what it's doing, like a fake blue screen of death, then it does things, then stops, leaving the target to think it's just one of those oddities that happens sometimes on a system. Also, I've been thinking about trying to make one default, brute force default BIOS passwords. Haven't got around to that one. Well, I need to find a device that would actually do this. And I've already told you the name of it was a Tensi. So I did some Googling around and found some limited items. But then I finally found the Tensi, which made this really easy. It's super small. Actually, I'm going to pull one out here real quick. I'll move all my gear nearer to the stage section that I am currently at. All right. Yeah, super small. Tensi 2.0 is what I usually use. There's actually a Tensi++ that's a little more expensive, has more options. But for what I'm doing, just the normal Tensi will work. Now, the version that has no pins on it, and it's this size, $16. You plug it in. You can make it via USB automatically through mouse and movements and keystrokes. Programmable in the AVR. You can do AVR program directly in C, or you can use Arduino if you want to do much easier development. Let's see. Like I said before, $16 for this one, $27 for the more feature-rich one. But if you're just doing stuff like keyboards, this is really all you need, and it's smaller. And you can buy those from pjrc.com. A little bit of the feature differences. Flash memory on the unit I'm usually using is like 32K. RAM is about 2.5K. Not a whole lot on there, but it's enough to do what you need it to do. Now, to actually develop one of these things, there's several items you have to set up. First of all, you'll need the Arduino development package. You can get that from Arduino CC. Now, Arduino is a completely different, it's kind of an open hardware platform for doing hobbyist microcontrollers. And a bunch of people have developed hardware to go along with the Arduino development environment. Tensi just being one example of that. You're also going to need the Tensi serial drivers to be able to do some programming on it. The Tensi loader, which is this extra tool that instead of putting in a specific COM port, you press this little button on the Tensi, and it tells the system, hey, I'm ready to load a program, send it to me. Also, I'm going to be using something called the PHUKED library, where I have certain functions I've already written that will allow you to make the process of sending certain keystrokes easy. For instance, you don't have to script it to open up the run bar and type something in. I would have that all made into a function for you. Also, of course, you'll have to set the board type, because when you set the Arduino environment and you install the the Tensi package on top of that, you'll have a whole bunch of different options for what board you want to develop for. Like you'll have the official Arduino line, and you'll have like the Tensi and the Tensi 2++, and so on and so forth. Now, if you're going to start coding on these things, a few quick tips. Beware of the Tensi overriding your code. These things are going to act as keyboards. So when you plug it in, it's going to start typing stuff. If you have it set to automatically go off as soon as it's plugged in. If you're doing this while you're typing in your code, you're going to overwrite your code, which is really annoying. If you have something highlighted, well, you've just destroyed that section. You have to Control Z until you get back out of it. What I generally do is I open up Notepad before I program it and have my cursor in Notepad. I also hold down the button as I'm plugging it in, then let go. That way it never gets a chance to run whatever code's currently on the Tensi. And you really need to check out the docs. I'm going to be giving a few tips on the Tensi throughout this talk, but to really understand how the Tensi works, you really should check out the Tensi documentation. And as I said before, you can also develop for these in straight C, but the Arduino environment just makes things so much simpler. I have various things in the PHUKED library, as I mentioned before. Stuff like run it command bar, like I have a version for, I think, GNOME and one for Windows. I have headers in there for OS X, but I haven't added them in. Both Adam Baldwin and Ronan have both sent me functions I need to throw in the library for OS X. I just haven't owned an OS X box until here recently. Shrink current window, so let's say you want to run something, but don't want to hide it, at least shrink it down so it's only on the task tray. You can use shrink window for that. Press and release. If you want to press some keys you can just say print this, and it will automatically start sending it out the keyboard. Like print Adrian, it will just type Adrian wherever you're currently at. But if you want to hit like control keys or hit A a certain number of times or things like that, or hold A, you have to use various built-in methods of the keyboard layout that Paul, I don't know how to pronounce the German's name, the guy who develops the Tensi, has set up for you. I've made functions that make this a little simpler. Essentially, press and release says this particular key code, press it, and here's the number of times to press it. Otherwise, you have to go in there manually and say, press this key, this key, this key. All right, press them. All right, now release them all, and that's just a pain. Show diag was no longer in the library, really, but that just shows you diagnostic information like what pins are set high and low. Dip options was just something I sometimes would put in the comments because I'd forget which particular dip switch I had set to do what function. So I'd say in there, and I'd press a certain button on the Tensi, and it would tell me what my options were. Then I have various things in the library, like what LEs. What was that? No, I don't. I mean, they're so easy to produce and cheap. I don't see how to be a big market for it. Well, I have all the instructions on how to put one together on my website. So, well, the Tensi you can buy from Paul. And all the projects I do with them, I pretty much have.
Well, I mean, Darren Kitchen has his and his project with it, but he's selling those for like $80.
Okay, I don't get the point of. If it's just straight up this, I don't see why people would want to buy one when they could just solder one together. But okay.
Convenience of lazy. People are scared of solder.
Also, to make your sort of package inside a custom-made mouse, you could fit your own board on there, and it would be much less.
Yeah, there's things you can do along those lines. Well, back to the library, I have various things set for. There's very little user interaction that you can get for knowing what the user is doing on a system, other than maybe like when that caps lock key's on. Normally, until well, I'm going to show you in the project here in a bit, after the refresher. Normally, you don't know what the person's typing on the machine, other than perhaps lock keys. Because whenever someone presses a lock key, a message goes out to all of the keyboards in the system saying whether or not a certain lock key is to be enabled or disabled. You can use this to tell when someone's at the keyboard by turning on caps lock. Generally speaking, that's going to get annoying real fast, so someone's going to turn off caps lock. At that point, you know someone is at the keyboard. So times like that, knowing what locks keys are down is very useful. And I have various functions for telling that, like is num on, is caps lock on, and is scroll lock on. Now, a little bit about basic electronics. One of the things I've set up in the past on these is a system by which, well, let me actually, I'll be running a little fast here, so I'm actually going to take the time to show you the original unit before I show you the more refined stuff that I have now. This actually is based around the Tensi++. Essentially what I've done is I've taken it and I've added dip switches so I can choose what I want to run. And I've also added a little light sensor. And I'll show you about the light sensor in a second. But let me tab out of this. Let's go to Notepad. Let's see. Save that, yes. And let me show you what this does when you try to use it. Now, currently I have it set to automatically run its payload whenever I press a button. Obviously, you would not want to do that if you're trying to use the device surreptitiously. But for the sake of demoing this, this just makes it a lot more convenient. Assuming you can actually get it in your freaking USB port. There we go. All right, apparently I have the motion detector set. That's that run diagnostics I mentioned before. Oh, it looks like I have every single payload set. It's currently bringing up my website. It's trying to make a Facebook post. It's doing all sorts of stuff. It's trying to copy to a thumb drive that doesn't actually exist. Because it's currently dark, it says that. Let me close out some windows and set these all down, except for key 1. Key 1, if I recall correctly, just shows me what payload is what. I did this because I forget. Don't save. Aiden was here. Good way to mess with people. And it comes an even better way of messing with people when I show you the refinements I've done recently. Like I said, this is the remedial section of the presentation. But I won't get people up to speed. How many people have seen the Programmable HID project before? Okay, so only a few of you. So I guess it's not too bad that I'm going over it again. All right, I currently have it set just to show me diagnostics. Like it shows me what the analog pin is set to and what the various dip options are. And you notice since I had caps locked down, it typed everything in all uppercase. Let me try that again. But 1 is just show diag. Number 2 is type Aiden was here in Notepad. 3 is go to IronGeek.com. You always saw that. Number 4 is actually set a caps lock trap. So let me go ahead and set 4 on there.
Would there be any way to develop it so you could access it remotely?
Yes.
Have you done that?
Not yet. I know other people who've set up through wireless. I'm going to set up one for doing Bluetooth here before long. I have some parts on order. Just haven't done it yet. And in theory, you could set it up for Ethernet as well. All right. I just pressed the button, and it set the caps lock key. Now it's turned on caps lock again. That's annoying. I'm going to turn caps lock off. It now knows I turned off caps lock. It knows someone's at the keyboard, and it does something. Now, I don't have a USB extension with me. One of the other cool payloads I want to show you is the light sensor. And I'll explain how the light sensor actually is set up here in a second. The motion detection, well, let me see. Come on, get back in there. All right, let's turn on brightness detection, which is 7. Let's say you want to know when someone goes into a room, they turn the lights on. You can program it to do different things depending on the amount of light in an area. So I pressed it, and of course it says, I'm scared of the dark because it's kind of dark up here on the stage right now. Let me resize this to a more manageable condition. And, all right, don't save that. Let's hope I have a flashlight in my pocket so I can make it a little brighter in here. Unfortunately, I did not bring a USB extension cable with me, of all things, at least not up here on stage with me. So I'm going to have to slightly improvise this. You know what? Something fell out of my pocket there. Well, let's try this. Let's see if there's enough light coming from my screen to do the job. Well, I got one on this also, but that might be too much light. Now, see how it says the lights seem to be on? Well, let's do something a little bit more nutty. Would you be giving me my coat, Glenn? A little bit, while he's bringing me my coat, a little bit about how I set this all up. Here's the way the schematic is set up. I use a photoresistor. And the way a photoresistor works, as more light hits it, it decreases in resistance. Well, I don't know if you know how a voltage divider works with Ohm's law, but let's say that this is a 10K resistor, and this is 10Ks at normal lighting conditions. Well, if you have 5 volts across this, each one is going to be 2.5 volts dropped across that particular load. And you can measure it via the analog in on an Arduino-based device. In this case, a Tensi. I'm using this particular analog in. As the resistance of this photoresistor goes down as light hits it, it's going to drop less of the voltage because it's less of the total resistance on that load, and more voltage is going to be dropped across this 10K resistor. As that happens, you get a reading, and you can base certain actions on those readings. For instance, if I was to go back in here and hit this thing with a laser, let me know when it actually comes up so I can let go. Oh, that's a little bit, not enough. I know I didn't quite get that one right. Huh. You know what? It's possible I changed the payload and messed it up. What it's supposed to say is about a nuke flash. In other words, you can do more than just on, lights off. You can do various amounts of lighting. And something is screwed up on the programming of this particular one, so that's not functioning right now. Another thing I've set up with this in the past is motion detection. And the way the motion detection works is essentially it's just looking for changes in lighting. For instance, whenever my hand moves underneath there, it might notice that there's been a change. And when it notices a change in lighting, like a shadow passing over it, it runs a certain payload. Now back to how all that's done. You have that voltage drop you can read, and as the resistance of that particular photoresistor changes with different amounts of lighting, you can read that. But you can do the same thing with a temperature gauge and various other sensors you can set up. In eGads, I opened up a lot of windows there. Come on. There we go. And that's just another example with more clarification on how this works. Also, there's something you can configure called pull-up and pull-down resistors. There's a thing called floating voltage that if you don't necessarily explicitly put a resistor on something and you try to make a reading from that particular input, it may say that it's on and it may say it's off. So you want to pull it a certain way. So let's say this is the input, and I want it to normally be grounded. Well, I could put a pull-down resistor, which normally takes that input to ground. But if I flip this switch and put it straight to 5 volts, it has a stronger connection to plus 5 volts than it does ground. So that input is going to read plus 5 volts. This is to keep things from fluctuating. If you don't use pull-up and pull-down resistors, what ends up happening is you're going to get spurious reads. Sometimes it's going to read that that particular input's on. Sometimes it's going to read it's off. The nice thing about the Tensi is you can set it up to have and use internal pull-up and pull-down resistors. Now, there's a lot of other people who have been developing stuff with the Tensi, programmable HIDs and whatnot. A few people I want to mention, Dave Kennedy and Josh Kelly. Now, I did my embedding in a mouse and various little cubicle toys. They embedded one in a keyboard and gave it to the boss, which is my understanding that he had to keep going in parts replaced and replaced the entire computer, replaced everything but the keyboard, and he still kept having problems. Eventually, they snuck in and took the keyboard back out, as I recall. The Rubber Ducky project from the Hack 5 folks, so Robin Wood and Darren Kitchen are working on similar things. And Brad Bowers, Monte Elkins, and Richard Rushing have all been working on similar items. Okay, that was my very quick remedial section. Now to show you the new stuff. And at this point, since I should have the time to speak in a more clear manner, I will slow down a little bit. Another thing I've been doing some research on in the recent past is hardware keyloggers. And conceptually, these are very easy. Essentially, you just plug them in between your computer and your keyboard. They sit there and they monitor whatever keystrokes are going across the line. And snoopers can extract things like passwords, what activity the person's been up to, documents, and whatnot. Now, the way they market these things, if you go out to these websites that sell hardware keyloggers, they'll say that they're for writers who want to back up their work. And that's just kind of asinine. I don't know how you all write, but when I'm writing a document, I'm typing up here, I'm typing down here, I'm typing over here, I'm making these grammar mistakes, I'm backspacing, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. There was no way in hell I'd ever want to try to recover a backup from a hardware keylogger. That would be just nutty. But I think it's kind of an excuse. Businesses monitoring employees. They say, well, you can monitor what your employees are up to. Well, if you're a business and you own the network, you'd probably be better off forcing out via GPO some specially made bit of spyware than doing this and have it report back to you. Parents monitoring their children, yeah, maybe, but I think it's far more likely people are going to be buying the monitor of their spouses than their children. If it's your child, install some net nanny-like program, make sure they're not an admin, and that's the way to go. Then, of course, there's also pen testers, crackers, and spies, and I think they have the most use for these kind of devices, well, other than the whole spying your spouse bit. Pros and cons of hardware keyloggers. Hardware keyloggers are not as likely to be detected by anti-malware apps. That doesn't mean they're all completely passive, but some of the better ones, you don't see any kind of device when you plug it in. You'll see the keyboard that's supposed to be there. So they're not likely to be detected by anti-virus apps or anti-malware apps, though some do leave some ways of detecting it, and I have a whole nother talk on that subject. Keystrokes can also be logged even before the OS boots. Some people use software keyloggers. Those aren't going to get anything until after the OS boots. With a hardware keylogger, you can get someone's BIOS password. Also, of course, they're going to be OS independent, so whether the box is running Linux, Windows, or OS 10, it shouldn't matter. Now, there's a few cons to these. One would be physical access. Generally, you're going to need physical access to a system to be able to install one of these. However, I have a few workarounds for that as well. How many people here have ever used software that requires a certain licensing dongle? Like CAD software and so forth, and some forensics packages require that. Well, you can find an application that the target might want to use, send them the demo version, and say, hey, and we'll give you this for free, and here's this dongle to make it keep working. Just plug it in. It doesn't even take up a USB port. It plugs in line with another USB device. Just plug it in line to your keyboard, and you're done. And then later on, when it finally expires, because it was just demoware, you say, oh, I think I sent you a bad dongle. Would you send me back that dongle, and I'll send you a new one? So maybe you don't need physical access if you can socially engineer well enough. Also, you generally get very little information about what app it was typed in. If you're seeing a bunch of URLs, they were probably using a web browser. If you see Control-Delete, something, tab, something, enter, you probably know they were logging in to the Windows box. But you don't get a whole lot of information back on what apps are up. Software keyloggers, you generally do. Also, they're kind of expensive. I've seen ones from, I want to say I've seen ones up to $600. Some of the cheaper ones I've seen are in, I think, the $30-something range. And if found, of course, they're fairly easy to remove, though there are people making hardware keyloggers that sit on the PCI bus. So, I thought, what if I can combine all of these? One of my problems earlier is I didn't know what someone was doing on the keyboard. Only kind of input I could get back from somebody was like the lock keys. And that's just not a whole lot of information. But what if I could make a fuck device that was also a keylogger? I could only log the keystrokes, but I could also base payloads on it. So, let's think what I can do with this. Well, first of all, log all the keystrokes to a micro SD card and pull off the payload later. That's nifty. Base payloads on keystrokes. I could do things like look for username and passwords. For instance, if I see the pattern of keys, Control-Delete, something, tab, something else, enter, I have a good idea that that pattern might represent someone logging into a Windows box. At that point, that's the username and password. I can set it to go, okay, 8 hours from now, when I think no one's going to be at work, I'm going to log back into the box, use that username and password, and do whatever it is I want to do. You can also screw with the person typing, as I'm going to show you here very shortly. And another great thing about combining keyloggers with devices you can program in the Arduino environment, there's so much of a user base of the Arduino environments, and so many people have come up with peripherals like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and Ethernet adapters that you can really expand this out a whole lot. So in the near future, I hope to make my own keylogger that I can get the logs back via Bluetooth. And I have some stuff on order for that. Hopefully by ShmooCon, I'll have that in order. Now I have a few problems that need to be solved in this project. First of all, I have to make the hardware reliable for different keyboard makes. I've had problems in the past with certain hardware keyloggers not working for all keyboards. Packaging, my current packaging is either something that's kind of dangling with wires all over the place, or it's just breadboarded out. So eventually I need to come up with some packaging that's a little bit more surreptitious that you could hide behind someone's machine. Also, I want to keep the cost low. Now, my cost is probably sitting, well, I want the average guy to be able to put this together also. Okay. So currently I have in my logger these devices, not including the SD card, which how much that costs. A 2 gig SD card can't be that much anymore. You got your Tensi for $16. You got a PS2 female cable, which you can pull off an old KVM switch. I'm sure you can buy them someplace too, but I just rip them out of old hardware. I do a lot of dumpster diving. An SD adapter, and if you're going with the USB one, you got to do a USB host adapter. So we'll say for around 40 bucks, you can put together one of these devices for the USB type, and a little cheaper for the PS2 type.
What's the USB host adapter?
This particular one is from Shuri Electronics.
Oh, what is it?
It's PIC based.
Okay. Well, oh, is it to hook a keyboard up?
Yes.
Okay.
Libraries you're going to need, of course, the PHUKED library I'm using for this. The Tensi PS2 library, but I have to hack this massively, and I have my own version on my website, which is in the project page. The one that Paul has out on his website doesn't log all keystrokes the way it needs to for me to look at them and use them, and I need more information, so I've modified the library somewhat to do what I need to do. I'm also using an SD card in FAT16. Since I'm using FAT16, I'm going to be limited in the total file size, but if you're using a 2 gig SD card, it takes you a long time to type in 2 gigs of text. So 2 gigs is plenty. Yes? Would you repeat that louder?
Putting the library on GitHub so other people can co-program.
Oh, that's actually not a bad idea. I got it on my website right now. I just haven't used GitHub. All right, the PS2 Keylogger, going old school. This is the first little demo I want to show you. For the PS2 Keylogger, there's only libraries out there. I had to hack them a little bit to recognize extra scan codes. The way these works is it's kind of like a serial interface where there's certain scan codes that represent certain keys. And you have a key code, and then you'll have another code that says that key was released and let go of. And you have to look for those. The library took care of most of that for me. I had to add certain codes, and I also had to make certain things report back to me of what the status of certain held keys were. But that's all in my library, which is available on the website. The wiring is fairly simple. I just wire it up like this. The SD card goes to the top pins, power it up, and the pins on the female side of the PS2 adapter are like this. Pretty much you're going to have to read the documentation on Wikipedia on what goes to what. I actually copied some of this information from them. And you can wire it straight up. But essentially it's the 2 power pins and the clock and the data pin. Hook it up, and this is pretty much all there is to the circuit. Now if I was to demo that, I have all my equipment down here, so let me whip that out. I put everything in nice little Ziploc bags to keep it organized. Now the way this particular one works, and unfortunately I'm going to have to swap this SD adapter out. I've ordered 3 more here recently, but they didn't come in time for this talk, so I've got this and a little 2 gig SD adapter in it. And it also functions, this particular one at least, as a PS2 to USB adapter, because I'm not going PS2 back out. So let me plug that up. Let me get myself untangled. All right, delete that. And I'm going to hook up a PS2 keyboard. This is the point at which having a table would help. All right. Hopefully no wires came undone while I was doing this. All right. I'm going to type on the PS2 keyboard and hopefully test. Yeah. Cool. It's actually typing. Now, I could pull that SD card out, and what I have there has been logged. But that's a bit of a pain, so I actually made some quick keys. If I hit Control-Alt-L on this, it'll actually type out the log. And as you can see, I typed in test. It shows me the different control keys I held down and what I've typed. Also, another thing you can do with these devices is you can have it go off and do a certain payload. Way back at ShmooCon 2011, way back when, I showed up a quick demo of looking for Control-Alt-Delete, Tab, something, Enter, to grab a username and password, and we use it later. That's completely doable. I have a different demo for you now. Let's say someone's going along and they decide to send me an email and they type my name, Adrian. So you can modify the keystrokes however you like. I also have a few other things on here, like Control-Alt-D deletes the keylog, so that clears it out, except for you see the control sequence I sent. The code for this is kind of ugly, but it is all up on my website already. If I was to pull that up, let me see. I think I'm going to open it up in Notepad instead. I said all the sources out there. The PS2 one, there's a special library you're going to have to copy into your libraries folder of your Arduino development environment. And the code for the logger itself, it looks better if I switch this to do highlighting. A bunch of comments, include a bunch of libraries. I set up the SD card, and essentially I have it set to recognize certain keys and automatically replay them, as well as log them out to the SD card. But I'm also in the top section, in the main loop section of this particular Arduino sketch. I'm looking for things. Like right here, I'm looking if the mod keys are mod control, mod key alt, and the temporary character is L. That means throw the log out. And I have functions all set up for that. The code looks a little ugly right here now, but if you start reading through it, I don't think it's too difficult. And anybody has some suggestions for adding to it, let me know. I actually need to go and make some improvements to the PS2 one. While I was messing with the USB one, I found where I had this one little buffer overrun issue. And I might have similar issues with the PS2 one. The PS2 one also I'm using int in a lot of places where I could be using a byte instead. And I was having weird issues with type conversion in the USB one, which I probably will also have in the PS2 one until I go in and fix it. But that's the PS2 one in a nutshell. Now, the USB one's a little different. And I have a different name for the USB one. The USB one I call the User Recording Programmable Head USB Keyboard Dongle, or the You're Fucked. Now, this one's going to take a little extra hardware. I think I pointed out that $15 host shield I had to get. Well, it's not really a host shield. It's not really necessarily designed for a Tensi. I had to modify things and make it work that way. But the way it works is it comes from Shure Electronics, and I had to fight with them a little bit to get the source code for it, because they'd send you out reports that had more information you needed. But I'll get to that in a second. To actually program one of these things, you're going to need a Picket 2 programmer, or probably a Picket 3 will work fine too. I'm using the clone from Shure Electronics. I use the Picket 2 development programmer and debugger software. And if you want to do any code hacking, I have a hex file out there, and you can essentially use the loader to throw that hex file straight onto the device if you have the programmer. But if you want to play with my code, my source code's out there too. I basically took Shure Electronics, or whoever wrote the original firmware, and modified the code to have less information in it to make it easier for me to parse. But if you want to hack the code I put out there, you'll probably have to download this development environment. It's more or less free. This demo version doesn't have all the optimizations, but it's just fine for all particular purposes. The wiring for it, very much like what we had before. You power it up, and you hook the RX of the USB module to the TX of the Tensi, and the TX of the USB module to the RX of the Tensi. And you basically have a serial connection where you can sit there and monitor. And whatever's typed in on the keyboard, basically it's turned into a serial feed that you can read on the Tensi, then you can replay that, as well as log it to the SD card. Now, I had to get the source for this because the original HID reports I was getting back looked more or less like the stuff in blue here. And I don't need those characters. And the more characters I have, the harder it is to parse. The dashes aren't needed. And the character returns caused issues as well. it took me a while to convince them that I need the source, and I don't think they understood that the product would be much more valuable if they released the source. But they finally did release the source, and I hacked the hell out of it. I don't know crap at all about PHUKED programming. PHUKED isn't nearly as user-friendly as Arduino, but I figured out enough to simplify the reports massively. And you can get the original code and hex files from the Shure Electronics website at the following URL. Here's the screwed up thing. When you go to the product page, they don't actually have a link directly to that. They say, search for this little string on their help site. They could just as easily link to it like I do. I'm not sure. And I get the feeling that they have some serious problems with the English language. But you know, they were nice enough to send me the source, so it's all good. And then probably get some business from this, hopefully. All right. Once I modified the code, my reports look more like this. As you can see, that's a lot more simplified. And I can parse that out. And for instance, this particular key code is a P. This particular key code is an R. Specifically, this 15 part is probably the R. You can hold down more than one key at a time. These first few nibbles are going to be what mod keys are held down. So for instance, an A would be all zeros up to this 4. Left control, shift, alt. You'd see a 7 right here. And each one of these sets a particular bit. Right one, you'd see a 7 here instead. And if you hold down A, B, and C all at the same time, you see a key code for each one of those keys that are held down. In this case, I probably, I'm guessing, actually hit the A slightly after I hit the B, because you see where the 04 is coming in. But I can read that, parse that data, and essentially replay it and log it. So that brings me to the USB one. Now that's it all breadboarded out. For reliability's sake, I actually made one where I tried to solder something together. It's still flimsy looking, but it's probably better that I use this than I try to use the one I had breadboarded out. So let me salvage my SD card adapter. Like I said, I have 2 more of these things on order so I can make more demo units. And I'll show you some demos on that. All right. This got another keyboard down here someplace. When I would do electronics demos, I seem to have a bit of a flock of seagulls presentation style without the hairdo. How many people were kids in the 80s? All right, plugging this in line with a USB keyboard. Please work, please work, please work. All right. And I'm going to Alt-Tab, hopefully, until I get to a notepad. Cool. And I don't know what kind of things I have in this log, so I'm going to delete it right off the bat. I pretty much use the same control keys as before. So you have your normal stuff like I can type whatever. Apparently I still have caps lock on. All right. And I can pull the SD card out and read it in a machine. Or if I just want to dump it, Control L, and that should dump the information out, as you can see. But let's talk about modifying keystrokes and monitoring what someone's typing and making actions according to it. Of course, I had that original payload where someone types in Adrian. It types in is awesome. And by the way, I made a mistake while I was doing this. I was testing out this particular device at work and had to answer a coworker's email. So I signed my email Adrian, but wasn't paying attention. So I looked incredibly egotistical, which I suppose I possibly am, but still. Because she responded back with me, yes, Adrian is awesome, or something like that. I'm like, okay, forgot. Anyway, but that's one payload. But let's do something a little bit fancier. I have basically a ring buffer in my structure that logs the last 10 keys and then compares these last 10 keys to various things. So let me hit F12, and you can have lulls. So let's say I type in why don't, pardon me, don't you go to SkyDogCon. So basically it lullizes it. I can also say, you know, you can have a cheese burger. And those all need the keys I'm typing. I'm typing it correctly. It's just modifying it. Don't believe me, you can play the thing later. And it lulls the speech. I was going to do leet speak, but quite frankly, leet speak, there's so many different replacements you can do. I decided to go with that instead. But that's basing payloads on keystrokes. And also with this, I mean, there's tons of different options. You can do the whole control-delete thing, look for passwords. Depending on how the machine's set up, you may have to look for instead just control-delete, and then the next thing will be the password and already know a username, because some people aren't necessarily connecting to a domain or they have the last password remembered. So things are going to vary somewhat, but it shows you the potential. And let me go ahead and do a Control-L just to dump that log again. And you see it actually typed out what I really did type in, as opposed to the lulzized version of it. All right, more ideas I have. And this is kind of a preview talk for a version I want to do at SHMU. I've submitted a paper for it. Well, paper is not exactly the right term. I'd probably skip out the whole intro part there because I wouldn't have time for it. But some other things I want to mess around with is wireless keylogger. I have a Bluetooth module coming that hopefully I'll be able to connect to it after I have physical access for a short time. I can connect to it later on via Bluetooth just getting near it and dump the keystrokes. Ethernet logger might be interesting, so you can terminal into the little Tensi device and get your keystrokes that way. So also ideas. Current problems with my PHUKED device is it's not passive. It shows up as whatever vendor ID and project ID I have it set to. I have a whole talk on malicious USB devices and talk about how you can possibly detect various things. Having this not be passive is not something I want it to be passive, but I don't know if it's going to be a possibility with the current hardware I'm using. Also, with the current host adapter I'm using, if you plug in a keyboard with a hub in it, it will not function. That's kind of a bummer. I also want to make the packaging kind of smaller. You can see this particular unit right here. It can be made a fair amount tinier. I mean, that's not really too bad if I package it up, but I still want to make it smaller. Also, there's some new hardware coming soon, which I cannot allow to talk about yet, that should hopefully make it more reliable and smaller. Whether or not it's going to take care of the USB hub issue, I'm not sure about yet. All right. Yes?
The reason why it won't work with the hub is you're assuming that it's not going to have enough power because of the hub, right?
No, it just doesn't work with the hub because it sees the hub type device in line also, and it goes, I don't know what the hell I'll do with that, and it gives up. All right. If you want more information, source code, and these schematics, they're all out on my website, this URL, and that's already up on my website. You can go out to the front page, and the top link should probably be to that. And I'll have this video posted probably Monday, along with everybody else's video, assuming I can get them all rendered in time. The PHUKED project site, which is the earlier project, is also out there. If you want information on Tensi Drino, check out Paul's documentation. USB DView is a real handy thing. I was talking about looking at those vendor IDs and product IDs. You can use USB view to view those. Though I was having some problems on Windows 7 64-bit and getting that to work properly. Redstream app is also useful to see what settings have been made. Check out HackFire's Rubber Ducky forum for information on their project. Some useful places for parts. Of course, the Tensi you have to pick up from PJRC. There's a few people making knockoff ones. I don't know if I'd trust them to work as well. Not to mention, from what I've seen, the knockoff ones are actually more expensive. I guess you don't pay for shipping, but for the extra $2, I'd rather have the one that really is the one from Paul. If you want stuff for general electronics, I go to eBay for a lot of my parts, like headers and sockets and whatnot. Shure Electronics is where I get that particular USB host adapter. If you want a very small mini USB to a normal USB connector, you can get one of those from Deal Extreme. That's why I got this particular one. Get LEDs from LED Shopping, but anymore I actually just buy stuff off of eBay. Here's a link to those. Here's a link to that particular adapter I mentioned from Deal Extreme. Also, I was at a security conference a while back, and the gift was a hub that looked exactly like this. I took one of these and took it apart, and once you can take it apart, you have this one little circular part that's the hub, and a bunch of wires that you can take apart and hand solder back in. And it's really great for embedding USB storage, and a Tensi device all inside of something as small as a mouse. And Deal Extreme apparently sells that same type of hub. At least it looks the same. I haven't ordered from Deal Extreme that particular model, but since it looks exactly the same packaging, I have to imagine it's probably the same internals. All right, events I want to mention. Of course, DerbyCon, which is happening again next September, I believe. So if you can make it up to Louisville for that, greatly appreciate it. Louisville InfoSec, not sure when that's going to be happening next year, but also a good time. SkyDogCon, which I guess most of you already know about. HackerCon. Freaknik, which is happening at the same time this year, so I guess you're going to be one or the other. I'm going to be at both here in an hour at least, like a couple hours. Nauticons, no one I go to regularly, and of course Outer Zone down in Atlanta. Recommend checking all those out. Also, one quick announcement. The nurse, while giving a presentation recently, he had a stroke. If you want to find out his current medical status, my understanding he's still in the coma, is that correct?
Yeah, showing signs of improvement.
Oh, is he awake?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I think it's like squeezing hands and stuff.
If you want to make a donation to help them out, go to socialengineer.org and Brad Smith donation. If you want to check out his current medical status, they also have information on the website. I imagine if you go to the front page of social-engineer.org, you'll probably have links to those particular subpages. Finally, are there any questions? That was the drinking from the fire hose. Yes?
More of a recommendation, don't do Deal Extreme. They hassle you for a long time.
Don't do what now?
Deal Extreme will hassle you for a long time.
I've ordered a bunch of stuff from them. I haven't had a problem, other than everything coming in English.
For some reason, they're only accepting orders from PayPal and American Express. So if you try to order with a Visa card,
I don't really want to order from a foreign company with anything but PayPal. So this for certain things really cheap. A few other places, good checkout. We stuff like Good Luck Buy. Though I haven't ordered anything from them personally. And Focal Price seems pretty nifty. But I ordered various parts from all those. Yes. 5 minutes. Any other questions? All right, there's no other questions. I guess I'll put all my stuff away. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry that was a little rushed, but a lot of material to cover.